For decades, it's been one of the most secretive meetings on the entire planet, right? Shrouded in mystery, fueling just countless theories. But you know what? Today, we're not dealing with theories. We're actually opening the file. Okay, so this is it, the cover of the report from the 1963 Bilderberg meeting in Cannes, France. And two things just leap right off the page. You've got confidential stamped on it, and then this warning, not for publication either in whole or in part. This tells you everything. This wasn't just some private get-together, it was designed to be a complete ghost in history. So, how in the world do you get 90 of the planet's most powerful people to say what they really think? Well, you use this, the Chatham House rule. It's really the key that unlocks the whole meeting. It basically creates this bubble of total anonymity, where a CEO, a future prime minister, or a top diplomat can speak their mind and it can never, ever be traced back to them. So, with the rules of the game set, let's crack this thing open and see what was so important that it all had to be discussed behind locked doors. All right, first things first. Who exactly were these 90 people whose conversations were considered so incredibly sensitive? Now, while the Chatham House rule kept their words anonymous, the report did give us a list of who was there. And looking at it, you really start to get the scale of this thing. This isn't just a list of names. It's practically a map of the entire Western world's power structure back in 1963. And I mean, what a list it is. You've got royalty like the Prince of the Netherlands chairing the whole thing. You've got titans of finance, David Rockefeller. Top-tier government players like the U.S. Undersecretary of State, George Ball. You even have future world leaders like Dennis Healey, who'd go on to be the U.K.'s defense secretary. And of course, the captains of industry like Henry Heinz II and Giovanni Agnelli from Fiat. This was a true cross-section of power, government, big money, and massive industry all in one room. So what do you even call a group like this? Well, there's actually an academic framework for it. Some scholars call it a transnational capitalist class. It's basically a global elite whose interests and personal networks go way beyond any single country's borders. And when you look at that guest list, it's a perfect snapshot of this idea in action. They might be from different countries, but they absolutely share a world of common economic and political goals. Okay, so we know who was there. The next big question is, what on earth were they all so urgently talking about? To really get what was on the agenda, you have to put yourself in that moment. It's 1963. The world is on a total knife's edge with the Soviet threat. But this report shows us that the West's biggest fear wasn't just the enemy on the outside. It was the deep divisions on the inside. The Atlantic Alliance was in some serious, serious trouble. And this quote from inside the report, wow, it just hits you. Black Monday. That's what one of the participants called the political chaos after French President Charles de Gaulle just completely blindsided everyone and vetoed Britain from joining what we now know as the EU. It was seen as an absolute catastrophe for Western unity. And that political crisis was tied directly to a huge military one. Here's the core of the fight. The United States wanted to be the one and only keeper of the West's nuclear keys. But France, under de Gaulle, saw that as an American monopoly they couldn't accept. They insisted on building their own nuclear force, basically arguing that Europe's security couldn't just be outsourced to Washington. And you can just feel the bitterness in this quote. A European participant stood up and complained that they were being pushed into the role of mere foot soldiers, the basic infantry, while America kept control of the ultimate weapons. This wasn't just some abstract strategic debate. This was about national pride, sovereignty, and Europe's future place in the world. But the crisis wasn't only military. It was also economic, and believe me, the stakes there were just as high. This was the billion-dollar question hanging over the entire conference. De Gaulle's veto didn't just slam a political door in Britain's face, it threatened to completely shatter the economic structure of the West. People were genuinely afraid it could spark a massive trade war between the United States and this new, powerful European bloc. So what was America's answer? It was something called the Kennedy Round. And this was the big proactive strategy they were all talking about at the meeting. It was this huge plan to slash tariffs across the board and tie the Western economies so tightly together that a trade war would become almost impossible. And look, this wasn't some quick fix. The report actually details the incredibly painstaking timeline. An American participant laid out the whole process, publishing lists, holding months of public hearings, all before any formal talks could even start the next year. It just goes to show the massive long-term thinking that went into managing the global economy. So, we've seen the crises they were dealing with, but let's pull back for a second and ask the really big question. What was the ultimate point of Bilderberg anyway?
I mean, this is what it all boils down to, right? Was this just a fancy, high-level debating club where powerful people could blow off steam in private? Or was it a place where the consensus that shaped our world was quietly hammered out?
Well, check out this absolute bombshell of a clue from George McGee, a Bilderberg insider. He said flat out that the Treaty of Rome, the treaty that created the European Common Market, was nurtured at these meetings. That's not a conspiracy theory. That is a direct quote from a guy who was actually in the room. And then there's this other fascinating pattern you start to see. Just look at this list. Thatcher, Clinton, Blair, Merkel. All of them went to Bilderberg when they were still up-and-comers, years before they were running their countries. This has led a lot of people to think that an invitation isn't just about networking. It could be a kind of informal vetting process, a place for the establishment to see if a rising star is on the same page before they get their hands on real power. So where does all this leave us? Was Bilderberg just a forum for essential, candid conversations in a really complex world? Or was it more like an unofficial boardroom where the future of the West was being mapped out? This 1963 file, it doesn't give us all the answers, but it gives us some incredibly powerful clues. It pulls the curtain back, just for a moment, on how the world really works. The rest, well, that's for us to debate.